Okay, so it's about 5 after 12. So I think I am going to go ahead and open it up. Again, we want to welcome everyone to this special little presentation highlighting the juvenile justice system. We have two speakers, first of all, that will be presenting. One is Leanne McKinsley. She is the Senior Director of Disability and the Justice Senior Director of Disability and Justice Initiatives. It's quite a title there. She has 27 years of experience working with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and the criminal justice system. She secured funding to create the NCCJD, the first national center in the U.S. to focus on addressing both victim and defendant issues involving people with IDD. Leanne also oversaw the creation of signature training pathways to justice. She has lived experience as a victim and survivor of ongoing childhood sexual violence. Leanne has a Master of Science in Social Work and a Master of Public Administration from the University of Texas at Arlington. Speaking with her will be Jessica Oppenheim, Esquire. She retired as the Director of the Criminal Justice Advocacy Program for the ARC of New Jersey in June 2021. And that is a statewide program providing advocacy for people with IDD involved in the criminal justice system. Prior to that, she was an assistant prosecutor in Middlesex County's prosecutor's office and a deputy attorney general in the New Jersey Division of Criminal Justice. She prosecuted Megan's Law and domestic violence cases and providing policies and protocols for law enforcement agencies and prosecutors throughout the state on domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse. So I want to welcome both Leanne and Jessica, and I am going to unmute you. Let's see if I can do that. Okay, hang on 1 second. There you go. Okay, and then Jessica, I've got to find Jessica's name. Okay. Now,
There we go.
And I'm also for these, I'm going to share with Leanne so that she can do her presentation. I'm going to make you the host right now, so. And then we'll reclaim it. So
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone joining us today to talk about such an incredibly important issue that Jessica and I, who've been working at the center for a while now, and the center being 10 years old, we know the depth and the breadth of the trauma and pain that happens when people with disabilities can get involved in the criminal justice system. And we come to this issue very soberly today. And what we want to do is just provide sort of a national landscape of this issue and talk about juvenile justice issues specifically before Leanne talks about her story with her son. So we thank you for allowing us to be part of this conversation. And anytime we get an opportunity to speak to chapters, attorneys, police, prisons, jails, we are there trying to really raise awareness about these issues. And of course, you will hear why that is so important today. So I'm going to, it says disabled participant screen sharing. I will share my screen. Here in 1 second. There it goes. Thank you. So it was already mentioned that I oversee the ARC's National Center on Criminal Justice and Disability. And what we do is advocate at that intersection of disability rights and criminal justice reform. The ARC's National Center has been around for 10 years. What we do is try to educate all the individuals already mentioned about the key issues facing people with IDD, both youth and adults, in the criminal justice system. There are key challenges that we try to address. One solution that we have really been trying to highlight is training, but again, that's only one solution. But training can help with that. And so that's why we developed the Pathways to Justice training, which I'll talk a little bit about. So the National Center on Criminal Justice and Disability was created in 2013 with support from the Bureau of Justice Assistance. We have a number of different projects that are federal projects that's creating training, providing webinars, bringing in the voices of people with disabilities. That's a really key goal that we have through our work. And we've got two full-time staff, including myself, Jessica, who's a consultant with the center, and she'll be talking with you a little bit more in a few minutes. So just an overview of what the center does. We provide nationwide training technical assistance, as well as information referral. So if you ever get into a situation where you're wanting some support, a family member needs that, a person with a disability can reach out, as well as attorneys, victim advocates, police officers. We really try to fill in that gap that is existing throughout the country to provide timely information to folks. If they can't get support there locally, then we will try to help them through developing either like personalized justice plans or in some way educating their attorney about these issues. We really try to be there at that kind of ground level to provide really important resources that many times families just can't access. This is just a few of our initiatives that we're working on. If you have any interest around learning more about the national training that's out there right now for police, like the crisis response intervention training, we've got some work around talk about sexual violence, and we also are doing work internationally. So we are happy to discuss that at a later time. So just a couple of data points I wanted to share about why this is a critical issue in our country is that we know that people with cognitive disabilities face the highest rates of violent victimization. The latest data from the National Crime Victim Survey found that people with intellectual disability, specifically that disability, are 7 times more likely to experience sexual assault than those without disabilities. But if we look at the other side of the coin, people with IDD are just as likely to be overrepresented as suspects in our prisons and jails. So from the Bureau of Justice statistics, we know that 2 in 10 prisoners and 3 in 10 jail inmates reported having a cognitive disability. And when you look at different types of disabilities, it's people with cognitive disability that face the highest risk of being involved in the system. So that's why we developed the Pathways to Justice training. And before I share that, Jessica, I thought you could speak a little bit about some juvenile justice issues.
Sure, Leanne, thanks.
Hold on a second.
I'm waiting for my slide, but in the meantime, I really do want to thank the ARC of Florida for hosting this and really taking this opportunity to highlight what is an enormous issue around the country, though I know that you have one particularly tragic situation going on there in Florida. So we don't want to take too much of your time, just a little bit to kind of give some context to what's happening there, talk a little bit about what the key issues are and what maybe some of the options are going forward. So first, this is just a list of some of the issues that some of you may be familiar with. Most of you have probably heard that term, school to prison pipeline. It applies to people of color, also applies to people with developmental disabilities and other kinds of disabilities in the school system. Schools really can become an entry point, unfortunately, into the criminal justice system. We've criminalized schools by having school resource officers on staff rather than putting that money into mental health needs at the school level. Essentially, what happens is we take behavior and we criminalize it. and essentially misuse the criminal justice, the law enforcement system, because we're not really addressing the problems the way we need to. So, for example, you have a situation where a young person with a developmental disability has aggressive behaviors, and they're caused essentially by a failure to handle a meltdown in an appropriate way. It's misread as criminal behavior. Eccentric or difficult or suspicious behavior becomes weaponized in the same way, right? We misread behaviors and criminalize them. So that's a baseline problem, that a cultural change that we need throughout the country. I've myself had prosecutors over the years say to me, nobody would confess to a crime that they didn't do. And that's truly misunderstanding the entire interrogation and interview system that we have in this place, in this country, characterized, for example, by the Reid technique, which is a particular way to get people to tell you what you want them to tell you. And we know we're talking about a population of people who are going to respond to authority in a certain way. They're going to tell a police officer, a judge, a teacher or a principal what they think they want to hear. So we see that resulting in false confessions, agreeing, taking responsibility for things they didn't do, maybe taking responsibility for someone they think of as a friend. So there are a lot of situations and issues that play into the result that we see young people with disabilities grossly overrepresented in the detention system, coming in and out at least 70%. That's a Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice statistics number. It's probably a little low. And if it seems high to you, keep in mind that we're talking about a wide array of different kinds of disabilities, including ADHD, dyslexia, autism, intellectual differences. So we're talking about a really wide array of differences, developmental differences that result in what is an excruciatingly high number of young people going through the system. So that's just a little bit of food for thought on some very complex, lengthy issues. Some of the things that we can do. How do we support children in the system? If you have a child who's classified, of course, they need to have an IEP. That IEP should have some real specifics in it, like the requirement that a parent be contacted immediately for any violations of school rules or regulations, rather than bringing in a school resource officer immediately. Keep in mind, not just a parent, a guardian, if that's more appropriate. Make sure you've made those communications with the school and that IEP reflects everything you want, right? That's your document. For those of you who may be parents or family members and thinking about this, I'm sure the ARC of Florida is a great resource for helping you figure some of those things out if you're not in a position to hire counsel, which is always another option. And the last thing I'll mention is that diversion. The need to have deflection and diversion programs and options is just imperative. So that's just a real quick overview for you.
Great. Thank you, Jessica.
Not at all, Gina. Thanks.
And thank you, Leanne. So now I want to introduce Leanne Depa, who is Brendan's mom, and she has been gracious today to tell her story. So I'm just going to turn it over and unmute you, of course. My apologies. There you go. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I really appreciate this platform to share Brendan's story. Of course, there are some things that I cannot share as we talk today that can affect his court case. And so I am limited in what I can and can't say, just to let you know up front. I really wanted to express how sorry our family is for the actions of our son on February 21st. This is a place that no family ever wants to be in, and we are just truly, truly sorry for the things that have happened. I want to kind of start with a little bit of a background about our family and how we got here. That Brendan came to us through foster care as an infant, and we adopted him at the age of 2. We knew early on that Brendan has some struggles, that he had difficulty in a daycare setting. He struggled with noises and with a busy environment. We changed daycares multiple times, and finally we found a daycare that fit his needs. This daycare was highly structured, and it was developed by USF, a program called the Tucker Turtle Program. And through this program, the teachers, they use scripts, they had posters, and they had bracelets that show the children how to deal with any issues that they're having, such as sharing and the such. The next year, when we put him into regular kindergarten, he majorly struggled and would have environmental meltdowns. So we decided to homeschool by October. During the time that we were homeschooling, he did really well. But we still had our struggles. We enrolled him in co-op classes where he could manage to attend for 1 to 2 hours at a time if it was the right program, the right fit for him. I was always nearby in case he needed any assistance. And so those beginning years, he did well with homeschooling. In 2017, our family started having some major medical crisis, including my mom had pancreatic cancer. And I'm sorry, it's emotional. I was going back and forth between my parents' house, which was 4 hours away from our house, and taking care of my family. I would divide up in a week, trying to get to the bottom of what was going on with my mom, and literally trying to save her because I felt like she was dying. It took a while, but we figured out it was pancreatic cancer. And then through all the long procedures of trying to get her what she needed. And then it continued on to where we had other family members having more health crisis. And it was just a major stress on the family. Whereas I had been managing Brendan's behavior up to that point, the stresses of the family and the things that we were going through, it made me revisit using medications that I had avoided in the past. And so I agreed to the antipsychotics that are sometimes used with people with autism. And I really didn't see where they were helping. And so it became this revolving door of going in and out of doctors' offices and Baker Acts and everything, trying to figure out the right combination of medications. We experienced difficulties with having multiple specialists involved. Everybody had a different opinion. You had lots of medication changes, and we never really could get the right combination. Eventually, in 2018, we found a placement in an autism behavioral hospital up in South Carolina. There wasn't anything here in Florida that met his needs and that our insurance would cover. So we sent him to, I'm sorry, actually it was closer to 2019 when we sent him there. 2018 is when we started all the medications. 2019 is when we sent him there. He went in November. And as you guys know, COVID hit soon after that in, beginning of March of 2020. The process for whenever you send somebody to residential is keeping the family involved, and where the family is, comes for frequent visits. If it was here in our state, we would have been going a couple of times a month. This way, we were only able to go once a month. And that was only for a short time because COVID shut everything down. Travel was shut down. The ability to see our son was shut down. And they just had all kinds of, issues that the hospital was dealing with because of staff and children getting COVID. So it limited our ability to participate in his plan of care. Our original hope when we sent him there was that we would get a better handle on his medications, figure out what was really working and what was harming, and then also help him gain more coping skills to come back to our family home. In September of 2020, my husband had a heart attack, which was known as a widowmaker because most people don't survive this heart attack. And that just added more issues to us trying to reunite with our son. In the insurance, they were putting pressure on that he had been there long enough, and they wanted him to, to be discharged from the hospital. So with APD's help, we were able to put him in an intensive behavioral group home. Once he started in the intensive behavioral group home, we were able to go and see him monthly again. But again, we were still dealing with all the COVID stuff in the beginning. When he first started there, I expressed concerns over him attending public school, because I knew, his whole life up until the point we had sent him to the behavioral hospital, we had homeschooled because he couldn't deal with the school environment. And so, it was really concerning to me, him being placed in the public school. The group home he was in, they assured me that they place all of their school-age clients in public school. And they told me they would be 10 minutes away if there was a crisis, and that they worked really well with the school. So when we first started, we had, testing done, and we developed an IEP, a behavioral support plan. I had expressed to the school some of his triggers, one of the major ones being any kind of removal of his electronics. The group home also let the school know that anytime the electronics were removed, that they had to be cautious and possibly even call in the crisis team in case it resulted in the need for a restraint. And so the first couple of years, well, I guess it was like the first year and a half, he had 2 teachers, and they were going along with the IEP plan of using a token economy system as a reward system, and that was going pretty well. This year, I'm not quite sure what happened to shift everything, but the teacher decided to do away with the token reward system and go to using electronics as a motivator. And she had requested that the group home send in his Nintendo Switch as a reward system. I wasn't aware of this. And so, now we're using his trigger as a reward or a motivator. And there were just, again, some concerns that I later found out after this incident regarding the IEP and the behavior plan, as far as what was being used and not used. And so I can't really go into the specifics of his charges and what he's facing, but I can let you know about where he is right now. So he currently is in the Jacksonville Pretrial Detention Center, and he's been there for since February 24th. He originally was charged as a juvenile and released to the group home, and then he was recharged as an adult and placed in the Jacksonville Pretrial Detention Center. He was placed in the mental health pod, where after the first day, he was put into isolation for his safety. He's been in isolation for the most part since then. So it's now going on 5 months. They tried for a day to place him in general population where he was, because I had been complaining about him being in isolation. They tried to help with that. They put him in a cell with 2 roommates, and he was upsetting one of the cellmates that because he was talking too much, and that had resulted in Brendan being attacked. So now he's back in isolation. And I'm afraid that's where he's going to continue to be, because he does not know how to get along with other neurotypical peers, that he has a difficult time with reading body language. He has a difficult time with understanding unwritten rules, and it puts him as a target. So at this point now, I'm not quite sure where it's going. But I really thank you for being here and caring and listening about it. And I want to be here also for other children who may be facing this in the future, if not facing it now. And it's something that we all need to do something about. I appreciate any suggestions and any help as we navigate this. And I just want to thank you for allowing me to be here.
Well, we certainly appreciate your story, Leanne, and it's something that any parent of a child with a disability does not want to go through. So one of our main purposes today was to provide this information, and also to see what parents can do and what is the next step. So I know that Alan may jump in along with Leanne and Jessica to kind of, how do we wrap this up? And Leanne had also has not Brendan's lawyer, but a lawyer, Rick, and I'm gonna say it wrong, Asfar, that may want to provide some guidance as well. So I've unmuted those individuals, and we're gonna open it up. Alan, do you want to start off?
Yes, first of all, appreciate the ARC of US lending their expertise in the fact that I know there's a lot more cases out there than just this case. We hear about them all the time. And I wanted to mention that the ARC in the ARC of Florida and the ARC of the United States can be a resource. I noticed that we have Candace Brower on. She's the regional conflict counsel. So she represents clients in juvenile court and adult court if the public defender has a conflict. And I know she often handles these type of cases too, and she's board certified. So I think there's a lot of people there's a lot of resources out there that can help. We also have Disability Rights Florida that is also engaged in this. Leanne, thank you for telling your story, to have the courage to be able to talk about it. I think it's helpful, and I think at the end we'll talk to you about how we can assist more. One of the thoughts was to send the state attorney, to send to everyone that is registered for this call, an email with the state attorney's contact information and some general things that they may want to share, to let them know their support, to, not directing what the final result would be, but to consider this about what's going on with your son's life right now, and to look at the big picture. As the CEO of the ARC of Florida, I'll be writing a personal letter also to the state attorney. And just want to make sure if anyone else has anything they want to say, we can open it up.
I did, Rick, I see that you were on. Did you want to say a few words and introduce yourself?
Thank you so much. Hopefully my camera and microphone will hold up. I noticed I was having some issues. My name is Rick Asfar. Very thankful to have met Mrs. Depa. I just wish it was under much different circumstances. She has really been a profile of strength and support for her family and her loved ones throughout this very difficult process. And she has, really done, I think all children would be exceptionally well served to have a parent like this in their corner. I am not a criminal attorney. I'm a civil attorney. So when it comes to matters of criminal stuff, for lack of a better way to put it, my understanding of it is limited to what I learned in law school. But this is certainly something that I find very, very interesting and really, really, really unfortunate what this child has endured, in our country. My understanding is that legally you cannot be found culpable for a crime if you're, you don't get charged as an adult typically. And Brendan's disability is such that, in a lot of ways, his functioning is not, his intellectual functioning is not consistent with somebody who is his chronological age. It's rather, approximately a third. And so to see what is happening with the system and how he is housed, I think it's one of those things that, in any way possible to draw attention to, shed light on, and assist with the system, processing this in an appropriate manner, I think is very important.
Thank you, Rick. Leanne or Jessica, any insight onto what parents can do in this situation or preventative measures?
Jessica, do you want to start from the attorney viewpoint? Oh,
Wait.
you're muted, sorry.
Let me unmute you. I thought I did that. Hang on.
You did. It was me. I hit a button. That's not you. It's usually me when it comes to technology. We hear, I know it doesn't help in any individual case to know that you're not alone, but that is the case. And that Florida, somebody put some kind of disturbing information in the chat, specifically with regard to Florida. I know in my state of New Jersey, we're a juvenile detention alternatives initiative state. We put very few kids in juvenile detention now. And yeah, the waiver process to waive a child from juvenile to adult is fairly complex. This sounds like what they did is they dismissed the initial charges and then recharged when he reached the age they wanted. So, we don't know anything about the details, and I would never comment on somebody else's case. I'm hoping there's that counsel who's representing him has learned a lot. It's really important for defense attorneys to educate themselves about the needs of people with disabilities, both once they are in the system like this, but also what they need to do to divert them. I imagine a competency evaluation was done and he was found competent, but keep in mind, that's a low bar. Competency to go to trial in most states is a horribly low bar. So it's so important to take every opportunity to educate the defense attorney, the prosecutor, and the court about, as Rick pointed out, this is a population who may be 25 years old, 28 years old, but cognitively, psychologically, emotionally, you're talking about someone who may be 12, 13, 14 years old, and they need to be treated appropriately. These are ADA violations, civil rights violations, and we tend to not think of them in those terms. So it's important to kind of refocus the narrative.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Leanne, I was going to ask, what could those of us as parents do to maybe beyond educating legislators and law enforcement to prevent this from happening?
I think prevention is key, and I'm so glad you raised that. And Jessica did talk about it. I mean, it is training. It's getting to know the law enforcement in your community. It's trying to help them understand that we cannot continue to criminalize behaviors of people with disabilities. And that is what's happening. So getting as involved as possible with those individuals that are a part of your local criminal justice system to help them understand, working with the ARC of Florida, with your local chapter, with Autism Society, whoever you can get who will talk about this, to really bring that awareness at maybe a level that they've never had before. And what we'd really like to see is more people with disabilities themselves being able to bring this issue forward. And we're looking at ways nationally, how do we provide a platform and the training and the education people with disabilities need as they mature, as they can talk about these issues for themselves too. So it's important that we equip families, and Leanne, that you have everything you need to feel like you can move this forward. I think what's hard for us, because we get these stories because of our national information referral line, and it's heartbreaking that families feel completely alone. You know, the attorney won't call them back. You know, there's all kinds of issues, and it's like people with IDD are completely invisible. It's like the disability isn't real in court systems. And so it's trying to really help provide a very practical understanding. And really, you know, where I've seen a lot of that happens is through relationship building in the community. And so the training I was talking about earlier, the Pathways to Justice, what we're trying to do is not just train, but create what's called disability response teams. It's basically a team that plans before something happens. And it brings together the attorneys, the police, the victim advocates, the disability advocates, people with disabilities together to talk about these issues so that there is a plan of action in place before things like this happen. And, or when they do happen, then a team of people can come together and say, this is how we're going to address it. So I feel like that we don't put a lot of time, energy, focus on it. We usually hear about these stories, you know, when they're actually happening, and it's almost too late to do something about it. That's not, that's the fault of the system. The system is not set up to be proactive. So what we can do as families, as people with disabilities, as advocates, is to get in front of it as much as possible and be able to create more of a feeling like maybe we do have some power because we are prepared. We know what could be ahead. So that would be, I think, just some real practical advice that I would like to kind of put out there to everyone. But I know it's not easy. You can't do it alone. You have to work together with others on this.
And make sure that
Thank
you're
you.
including disability service agencies, state and local agencies, and schools. It's so important that there's that open communication there. You can, as I listen to Leanne's story, you can hear where the wrong thing was done, right? The wrong fork was taken, and had it gone differently, you would have had a different resolution. But it's so important. We talk about training law enforcement a lot, and we try and do as much as we can, but it's really important to have the disability community be a part of that. The people who provide the services, those direct support providers, the people on the front lines at schools and teachers. It's got to be everybody.
Yes, definitely. And as Alan mentioned, we are going to send out the state attorney's contact information with a sample letter for individuals to use, as well as Leanne's slides that have all her information as well. Now I want to see, I know that we have Olivia on with disability rights, and I'm looking for her name. And I want to ask her if she would say a few words.
Sure, and I apologize if you guys hear any background noise. There is a weed whacker outside of my office window, so I apologize for that. I am the Senior Public Policy Analyst at Disability Rights Florida. You know, we have been kind of following a lot of these cases. I've kind of been watching the feed in the chat. DRF, I didn't work on the case, so I can't speak to the case itself, but it's been in the media a lot. About the overuse of the Baker Act in Palm Beach County. There was a settlement regarding that. You know, there's been some news around that. We've worked on, you know, reducing the use of restraint and seclusion in our public schools here in Florida as well. So this is an issue, obviously, we're paying a lot of attention to. We speak to bills. You know, one of our concerns last session, we see special needs registries pop up a lot, which the idea behind them is that if law enforcement is informed about a person's disability, they will be able to better interact with that person. But we have some concerns about that, is informing law enforcement about someone's disability if they haven't received adequate training on how to work with that population. You know, is that actually potentially making a situation worse? So these are some of the spaces that we've been navigating. But definitely, please reach out to our organization if you have any of these issues or concerns. If it's a case we can't take, we do offer information and resources and try to direct people to another source that can provide assistance. So please reach out to us if, we find that people with disabilities are getting wrapped up in the criminal justice system as a result of behavior attributable to disability. That's not necessarily what the Baker Act was intended for, especially for our IDD populations. I actually came from the Center for Independent Living prior to working at Disability Rights Florida. And I know that these were some situations that I worked on where I've had to go into jails and meet with, some of our consumers that got wrapped up in this. And, people don't think about this, but, whenever somebody has a charge, particularly when it's a felony, it then reduces the number of services that they're eligible for. So these individuals get wrapped up in a situation and have criminal charges they never should have had. And then compounded upon that, when they come out, finding things like housing, especially if they need housing vouchers, is really difficult, because if you have a felony charge, often you're excluded from participating in these programs. So people don't really, I think, recognize the compounding issues that people experience with this. So again, I should have our phone number memorized, but I don't. I will drop it in the chat in a moment, or Dean, if you have that handy and want to. But our website is Disability Rights Florida, all spelled out, .org. We do have an online intake form that people can fill out. We also do have a resource page that has lots of resources, some of it on overuse of the Baker Act, on supported decision making, on restraint and seclusion. We have a lot of educational, like, mini videos that are 2 or 3 minutes long, just to provide background information that you can use to help educate our legislators and policymakers that really just don't understand disability and how to work with this community. And so helping raise awareness and policy changes that we need to see can be helpful as well. So definitely use those resources, and we definitely need everyone's help in advocating for this community.
Thanks, Olivia. And I want to introduce you to Candace Brower. She's an amazing advocate, one of the best in the state, board certified, and also is the regional conflict counsel, as I mentioned before, for the area that includes Flagler County and all the way over to Gainesville and up to Tallahassee. Candace, you've heard Leanne speak. I know you deal with these cases all the time. Any advice to parents out there? Because we will be sharing this with family members. A lot of family members are just worried about, what if my child comes into contact with law enforcement? And a lot of parents, what happens once that happens? And I know Leanne has her own attorney right now, but any insights would be grateful for.
Well, I have so much, and certainly not enough time to say it all. But first, I want to say that story brought tears to my eyes, Leanne, and I'm so sorry about what happened to your son. And it's because of clients that I had like that I did sort of make it a mission of mine to become an expert in the field. And my agency knows, even though we do a lot of other things other than juvenile cases, my personal focus is on children and children's cases. And those are the things that I focus on when I go to Tallahassee, that I pay very close attention to. And Florida has made some strides regarding criminal charges and children. But there's so much more that needs to be done. Just because your child turned 18 does not make this an adult charge unless they do the upfile, since the charge happened before he was 18. So clearly they went out of their way to upfile this, which is it's sad. And the fact that he's been in isolation for 5 months adds terrible insult to the injury. This is actually right outside of our area, Alan. We actually don't have Flagler. It's the 5th region because of the way the lines are drawn. But I also know the regional counsel in the 5th region as well, and that these are important issues to him as well. But I'm happy to give free legal advice where I can when there's not a conflict. But just definitely the laws need to be changed regarding children, especially disabled children. Children are not just little adults when you represent them in a criminal case. There's still the same complications with talking to family. So, families do tend to get a little frustrated because the lawyers can't even tell the family everything. But calling back is a must. And if my lawyers didn't do that, they'd be in trouble. Keeping you informed of what's going on and court dates. And a case like this needs to be moved quickly, especially because of the situation of the child who's not a child anymore, but still being in isolation. It is only going to make matters worse. So I would want to know why things are not moving. If he's already been declared competent to proceed, then they should proceed, So certainly staying involved in asking those questions and understanding that the laws just don't favor children necessarily, especially in Florida. Any age can be arrested. There's not a lot of education regarding disabled children or dealing with children, and they are still dealt with like little adults. So thank you, Alan, for those kind words. I don't know what I did to deserve those, but it's because of Alan that I think I became such a big advocate in it also, because he helped me find my way around Tallahassee. So I appreciate that, and I will help however I can.
Thank you.
Thanks, Candace. And the courts are looking at redoing a redrawing of the line. So I anticipate by the end of next year, you will be in that district court of appeals.
Our lines actually have not been redrawn, but yes, they're talking about redrawing the circuit lines. So I don't know how that's going to affect our offices, but so far I'm still part of the 5th, but not Flagler.
Yeah,
so.
I'll tell you. I remember this last session when they did the registry, and I know Disability Rights Florida was really advocating that you can't have a registry without education. I think legislatively we need to do more about funding for educating law enforcement on what they do when they interact, of course. And I also, bigger concern is when you talk about an arrest and Baker Act, because it seems like when they start pushing don't Baker Act someone, you end up with more arrests. And if they say we need to stop arresting, then they do more Baker Acts. There's got to be a middle path about how we figure this out with
Baker Act
individuals
is
with
another word
disabilities.
for arrest, really. It really is. I mean, especially when it comes to children, and they overuse it for children because they think they can get around the arrest when it comes to children doing it that way. And they end up being locked up for even longer. So, yes, there's a lot that needs to be done and alternative measures.
The other thing that I would say is, in my experience, and I was a public defender for 3 years, and I represented juveniles, and I was board certified, that even though, there comes a point where the judge may determine competency, that the person is competent, some children and then later become adults with disabilities, as the court process goes through, if they happen to be in jail, they may lose that capacity because they're not getting the treatment. So I would always advise lawyers that every time you go to a court hearing, look at the capacity issue again, because capacity is more than, can I talk to you? It's being able to help your attorney, being able to understand all the issues. And, when someone has been getting certain medication and all of a sudden they're in a jail, they deteriorate often. In fact, I remember a lot of our incompetency proceed cases would go to competency restoration in the Panhandle. And by the time they came back, they were incompetent. They used to go back and forth and see one because they weren't getting the treatment they needed. So that's the one advice I'd give to an attorney that has one of these cases where they didn't believe the child was competent, and for some reason there was a finding of competency and it may have been borderline. So that's the advice I'd give.
Well, also for the attorneys representing disabled or even children, not incompetence, but disability can negate intent needed for certain crimes. So certainly if that is an issue, possibly in a case like this, and in many cases, and that needs to be explored, and experts need to be used. And all of that needs to be done while, looking at mitigation factors in case the child is found guilty.
Rick, did you have a comment or a statement?
I did. And again, I'm not a criminal defense attorney, but I would be curious about the types of experts that would be used to either negate the mens rea element or to establish the lack of capacity defense that you folks who are in the space, might have some familiarity with.
Hopefully the attorney already has a list of forensic psychologists that are used. Hopefully they're doing their own evaluations. There's a whole host of them throughout Florida. I would defer to my local offices wherever the evaluation's being done to ask who's the best one, who's the most trusted. But there are many people devote their careers to mitigation. Also, psychologists do, and they are excellent in finding what the court has to consider by law. And I think it's a dereliction of a duty of a lawyer to not do these evaluations with children charged with serious crimes, and especially disabled children.
Great, thank you. Well, we certainly appreciate everyone participating today. And again, much gratitude to Leanne for sharing her story. And we will be sending out, again, information on the state attorney's office, a sample letter, and Leanne's presentation. So I don't see any more hands raised or questions in the chat. So we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Alan, do you want to just say a closing remark?
Yeah, Dina, thank you for hosting this. I mentioned it to Dina Justice, and she jumped on it all of a sudden she took it over, and I do appreciate that because you're passionate about these issues because of your family and stuff. And Leanne, thank you for stepping forward and telling your story. I know you were limited based on the legal advice, but I think it gives us an opportunity to send this out, and we'll send it out to all the participants. We'll put it on our YouTube channel, and hopefully we'll be, for the others on here, that quarterly we're going to do a criminal justice issue. I'm sure Candace will bring one to me, or Olivia, and it'll give us a chance to continue to educate the community. The ARC of US has been a leader in this, and the states need to get involved too. I have written letters to state attorneys in the past on certain crimes with, they tend to be autistic children or adults that I've kind of gotten involved with. But there's a network of experts around the country that care about this issue, and we can assist linking families to those experts. And I appreciate it. And Leanne or Jessica, do you have any last words since you're the furthest away from Florida?
Just thank you so much again for inviting us to this. We want to be here to support you, Leanne, in this case, as well as our chapter in any way that we can. That's exactly why the center was created, because there wasn't anything out there. Certain agencies can do so much, but hopefully together we bring a much stronger case. And that is the whole point. So we are here to support you in any way that we can. Just thank you so much for letting us be a part of today.
Okay. Thank you all, and have a good Wednesday.